Loading is a 2D, 3D shifting adventure game about a kid and his complicated relationship with video games.
This is Xuyen or Toby Do, a Vietnamese video game developer and educator born and raised in California, now living in Ho Chi Minh City. His upcoming game, Loading, featured in the Computer World's showcase, is centered around a 10-year-old boy in the early 2000s, dealing with the passing of his brother and, as he said, his complicated relationship with video games, represented through a pixel art adventure and a first-person shooter experience. The game has been in development since 2021 and has been more of a side project to Toby's role in the field of game development at various post-secondary institutions. He's documented some of the development of the game in perhaps the most harrowing dev diary I've ever seen. It's the sort of thing that makes it clear why this game is taken a bit.
Now, if you're hearing this, that means that I've failed you. We announced that we had a new demo out, but I haven't finished the demo yet.
After playing the latest demo featuring some of the pixel art adventure half of the game as well as a peek at concept art and development assets and, whatever's going on here, I wanted to know more about this clearly very emotionally charged game and the story of how it came to be. So I spoke with Xuyen Do about his time in games academia as both a student and a teacher, his hopes for sharing more of the Vietnamese game scene with the world, and the origins of Loading.
So, I guess I would say I officially started making video games around 2017, but I've been dabbling in game development since I was a kid. I would say growing up I had two main creative outlets. One was making custom maps and mods in the Source engine, just messing around in Hammer, making maps in Far Cry 2. I also used to use Halo 3 Forge a lot. And then I guess my other creative outlet was, I was in middle school when YouTube was first starting to be a thing, 2005, 2006. And so I used to make little short films with friends inspired by Smosh or The Wine Cone, if anyone remembers that. So at the same time as I was doing these things, I also really loved playing video games and watching movies. The games I played most of the time were these more physicsy FPS games, but I was also a World of Warcraft addict. And this is sort of where my, original inspiration for Loading comes from. I used to play a ton of WoW with my friends. I had a best friend in high school who I used to run a guild with, but our senior year, he passed away suddenly. And because I was the only connection between him and our online friends, I was the one who sort of had to break the news to everyone. And yeah, that memory's just always been stuck in my head, and I've just been wanting to make something about that for a long time. For many years, I guess I struggled with figuring out what art form to tell this story in. When I tried to make a film version of this, just a couple years after it happened, I think it was almost impossible to do. I tried writing a script for it, but I think maybe it's just time. Enough time has passed to where I feel like I can look at it, I don't know, maybe a little bit more objectively, or I guess I've just lived more life, so it's been a little bit easier to talk about it now. I ended up entering a master's program in film directing at CalArts back in 2017, and then that first semester, some students there had wanted to start a game makers club, and I hadn't made a video game or even done anything video game related in a while, so I thought it sounded fun. I joined the club. And then while I was in there, I realized oh, maybe this idea I've had for so long makes more sense as a video game than a film. And then I dropped out and started making video games. I guess around that time there were some games that had come out that were also really inspiring. Nina Freeman's Sybil was sort of a big eye opener for me. Davey Wreden's The Beginner's Guide, and then Robert Yang's work in general were all big inspirations. I guess those games just made me realize oh, you can make a game about anything.
I'm always standing in front of my house, and then I start walking towards the front door.
So then in 2018, I moved back into my parents' house. I started doing game jams online. There were two big Discords that I felt changed my life that I joined. There was I joined Nina Freeman's Discord because she was streaming video games at that time, and then also running some game jams. And then so I started making stuff in there. I learned how to program around that time as well. And then, some of my games got written about on like Rock Paper Shotgun through the game jams, and that was really exciting. It kind of felt like, oh, maybe this is the right direction I'm heading in, I guess. And then the other Discord I joined was 98 DMakes Discord. He's not really doing too much stuff anymore, but he was like a YouTuber / game developer. He's pretty big in like 2018. He was taking like new games and then demaking them, so you would get like Bloodborne and make a PS1 version of it, or Uncharted or something, right? In his Discord, he was teaching a lot of us how to make like PS1 style looking games in Unity. I think a lot of the people who were in that Discord later went on to work on like the Haunted PS1 demo disc stuff that I guess has been really popular on itch. I think one of the other developers that's in the Computer World Showcase, Bryce Spewer, he was in that 98 DMake Discord. I think he joined around the same time I did, and we both learned how to make games from 98 DMake around that time. Yeah, so I was making games for a little bit, and then I applied to graduate school to study game design. In 2019, I went to the NYU Game Center. And actually, so Gil Lawson, who is hosting the event, we were classmates. We were in the same cohort.
Very cool.
So that's where I met him. And it was great. But then COVID hit. And then that whole second year was remote and pretty terrible.
Chuyện quan hệ, nhưng em cương quyết không đồng ý. Anh bảo rằng nếu muốn mẹ anh chấp nhận dễ dàng.
It was around 2020. I had made sort of this prototype, which is on, I guess, my itch.io page, called 2003, and it's about this little kid just playing a Game Boy while on a road trip. I would say there's when I was like, okay, I think I have an idea of how I want to approach this story. So yeah, I would say 2020 was when the prototype happened, but then I didn't officially start working on it until 2021. And it was my, I guess, thesis project for my master's program. And I've just sort of expanded it since then. That was made for a class at NYU called Prototype Studio. It's a semester-long course where you have to make a prototype for a game every week for a whole semester. I think that semester was 15 weeks long, so we had to make 15 prototypes. It's a really intense course, but I took that class with Gil, actually. I think it really helped find our voices. It's sort of like a game jam, so each week we're given like a different theme to make a prototype around. And that specific week, the theme was feelings or emotions, and then the one I ended up choosing was concerned. And I guess the idea I had for the prototype was I wanted to make a game that was about a kid who's playing a video game while listening to like adult problems like in the background.
Once it became clear that this prototype was something worth exploring further, Toby spent 2 years working on what would one day become Loading before launching a Kickstarter for the game. The campaign surpassed its goal of $15,000, allowing for further development with the rest of his team.
So we have 4 people on the team. There's me, who's doing the programming, all the level design, game design, 3D modeling. We have Janice Chan, who is our 2D artist, so she does all of the UI and pixel art. She also did our T art and illustrations. Brian Yoshikami, or he goes by Korkimo online, he did all the sound design and music. My friend Richard Van, he started out as just producer, but then I brought him on he's slowly gotten more roles. He's like a film director / writer. He's an amazing writer, so I thought just bringing him on to help out would be great. Oh, and because he's a director, he's helped me a lot with just doing the performance directing for the actors.
Bà có thấy cái mắt kiến tôi đâu không bà?
Ủa, sao mất mắt kiến hoài vậy?
When I went to the game center though, I studied under like Frank Lance, who is very, I guess he's a formalist. There's this big emphasis on procedural rhetoric, I guess, as Ian Bogos would call it, like that, the most interesting thing about games are their mechanics, not their art or story. Right. Maybe that's had some influence on me. So with Loading, it is, I guess it's a little gamier than my early work. There's this great blog post from Robert Yang from many years ago where he wrote about neorealism. It was like after World War II, Italian filmmakers started filming just like on location of like bombed out buildings, and I think that blog post has had like a big influence on, I think, some recent games like Despelote, for example, I think kind of took some inspiration from that movement of film where, you know, they shot their audio on location and asked people to improvise dialogue and stuff. And I think in that same way with loading, I've been thinking about that and thinking about just trying to capture reality as best as I can in some way, either through the performances or even just like, I guess the architecture, the buildings that are featured in loading are, I guess, based on real life locations from my past or that sort of thing.
Loading's demo, which is structured like a sort of museum, is based off of a cafe that Toby visits often in Vietnam. In fact, a lot of the places in the game are meant to reflect real-life locations, like his childhood home, and even versions of the digital spaces that he inhabited growing up. All of this is done, in part, of course, to imbue some reality into the game, but also to represent a culture that's so often underrepresented in the games industry.
The game is about not only like video games, but also like the world wrapped around the video games that you play within loading. I've spoken to this with other game developers a bit about how, I guess, you know, in the early 2000s, you know, there was this promise that the internet would be this, you know, amazing, heavenly place where you can do whatever and meet anyone and express yourself in a way that feels very free. And then as corporations have slowly taken over everything and the internet now, I mean, it's such a different place. And but even back then, I think even in the early internet, it was never really like that. I think looking back, I think there were many dark places on the internet that maybe are under talked about still, or I think developers are starting to talk about it a little bit more. There's another Vietnamese developer, his name's Henry Tran. He made a game called Last Seen Online that I think it's on itch.io. I think it's on Steam too. That touches on like the darker parts of the internet in the early 2000s. You know, I was born and raised in the US, and I visited Vietnam once as a kid in like 2007 or something. But then I haven't been back to Vietnam until I moved here 2 years ago. And it's been really illuminating. Like all of my dad's family is on this side, so getting to like reconnect with them and getting to know them again has been great. And just, I guess, reconnecting with my roots or my family's roots. I'm surprisingly wasn't very culture shocked when I moved here. I guess because in the US, we lived kind of near a Vietnamese community, which is where loading is based. It's based in like Orange County, California, where there's like a pretty big Vietnamese diasporic community. And I don't know, they've kind of warped that city to feel like Vietnam. So when I moved here, I was like, it doesn't feel that different. So all of the pixel art section takes place in Little Saigon in California. And then the FPS section, like it's kind of like the game is like Vietnam War 2, where America and Vietnam are in a second war together. And it's like kind of sci-fi. There's spoilers, there's some aliens and robots and other things. But so first part is in America, second part's in Vietnam. I was teaching at UC Irvine before I moved to Vietnam, and it was cool. I had really huge classes when I was teaching at UCI. It was like 200 people. I don't think I'd ever talked in front of that many people before in my life. But yeah, it's been good. Like, I love being in the classroom and teaching, and then just seeing my students like express themselves through video games. And there just aren't a lot of video games made by Vietnamese people that feel personal or experimental, and I'm really trying to push for that in my teaching. I hope it's working. I love seeing like when students start to find their voice as artists and just like helping them with that. It's just been a big joy. And then since moving to Vietnam, I'm Vietnamese, and the game scene here is still very new, and it's just been so much fun to see my students just like make such unique work. I would love to, I don't know, maybe have some sort of showcase for them sometime.
Thanks so much to Toby for taking the time to talk to me about loading, and thanks to you for watching. A demo for the game is available now on Steam, and a new version with more content is planned for later this year, with the game's full release not long after. If you want to know more about his work, I suggest checking out Toby's itch.io page that has playable builds of a bunch of prototypes and game jams like Meteor Strike and Grass Mud Horse. He also graciously offered a list of projects from some of his students, links to which can be found in the description below. I really suggest you take some time and check these out. A lot of them reminded me of the exciting, highly experimental era of indie games in the late 2000s. Who knows, maybe one of them will end up in a future Computer Worlds showcase.